And welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is there's nothing to do. We're such doing machines. We're human doings rather than human beings. And today we're looking at the space of being where there's nothing to do. There's no lack. There's nothing pulling us from the experience of the moment. But from that place of being, we have the capacity to be generative. So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome, welcome. Happy Friday to you and to everybody else who's joining us. So how about that? Good morning, Robin. Welcome, welcome. Great to have you here with us. So what if the transformation that we're seeking, the thing that's going to shift our experience of the world and of ourselves and of one another, of nature, what if we can't do our way to that objective? What if it's a matter of shifting our being? How does that happen? How does that work? So it was really interesting. I was doing a session with a client yesterday, and we were talking about intimacy. So maybe that should have been the topic for today, but we were talking about intimacy and what showed up inside intimacy, because they were perceiving it as this vessel, actually, that they got a glimpse into and then actually kind of stepped into the experience of it. What it was this magnificent tree that had roots that just set up a space to be able to nestle comfortably into the roots and to just be able to sit there and be with nature and read a book and just feel cradled, and no pull of anything else outside that moment. Being entirely, completely whole and complete and present. And if we, and to recognize that as intimacy was not only a revelation for the person that was experiencing it, but it was something of a revelation for me too, I have to say. Because when we can be just ourselves, wholly and completely, without needing to do something, without needing to fill any kind of gaps or holes or fix anything, to just fully be, as Robin, you're saying, finding comfort within yourself, finding, indeed, Robin, finding that wholeness, experiencing that wholeness so completely that that you need nothing more. That's intimacy. And I thought, wow, that's a really different notion of what intimacy is. And it makes me think, I don't know if you ever saw the movie with the guy who did Austin Powers. Good morning, Dido. So good to have you here with us. It was called The Love Guru. And it was really funny for those of us light workers that can laugh at ourselves. It was really funny. Oprah was in it. Deepak Chopra was in it. It was very funny. But he kept having these sayings that he would, copyright or trademark or whatever. But one of them was when he was talking about intimacy. Into me, I see. And I thought, wow, the way it was presented was pretty cheesy, but intimacy is perhaps seeing into oneself, like really our wholeness, our completeness. And when we are truly whole and complete and allowing the expression of that, that allows for intimacy, I think. And so in that space, there was no need, there was nothing to do. And this person said that it was perhaps the first time in their entire lives that they'd experienced that feeling, that there wasn't a pull calling them to do something else. And our wars, for example, what's war about? It's about needing more, or maybe it's about fighting a wrong, but most often it's about acquisition and control and domination, right? And where's that generating from? It's generating from lack, from scarcity, from need. And to get to this place of being that is whole and complete. It's interesting because I have had people say, well, then I wouldn't do anything, or then it makes it really hard to take care of the laundry, to get the laundry done. And maybe sometimes it's okay for the laundry to build up a little bit. I just, maybe it's okay that the floor doesn't get washed for a little bit until there's an inspiration to wash the floor. Maybe the values that drive so many of our behaviors aren't really our own values, but our inherited values. I'm not saying to live in filth or anything. I'm not advocating that at all. But I'm just saying that so much of the to-do-ness of our lives is just assumed, kind of. It's kind of inherited rather than generated. And from this space of being where there's nothing to do, ultimately what happens is that an impulse emerges that is creative, that is generative, rather than automatic or reactive. And it's been interesting to see, interesting isn't the right word. It's been such a complex of emotions looking at what's happening in the world, at least at what we're shown of what's happening in the world. It's not like we have a complete worldview at all. We have a very stilted worldview where, there's death and destruction happening all over the world in all different places, and we hear about it in select places. But that's a whole other conversation. However, it has become quite present for so many of us through media to be seeing what's happening, particularly in Ukraine and in Israel. That's not to say there aren't conflicts and abuses and atrocities happening elsewhere in the world as well. There are. We just don't hear about them. But on top of the sorrow and the grief and the anger and the outrage and the disbelief and confusion and hopelessness and all this whole matrix of emotions, what can we do? And we've been talking about this. We're going to talk more about it because the doing that we can do is actually shifting being. Because what is it that allows for that kind of behavior in the world? What's at the root of that? What's at the root of that is separation and a belief, a foundational belief that the world isn't safe, that there's not enough, that it's a dangerous place and there are enemies all around and we have to protect ourselves and we have to shore up our ground and expand our fortresses and our holdings, and that the world is a world of resources for us to be able to grab and use and abuse. And if you have it, then I can't, kind of thing. You know, I said this the other day, what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. You know, this acquisitional conquest kind of mentality. So Rubin says, that's where you take some time for yourself to reflect and have time for your intimacy. Maybe some refer to as meditation time for inner comfort to reset self. I have to learn to stop the inner thoughts of the of the to-dos to get to. So yeah, this is the thing, like we are enculturated to be human doings. Do all the things. And in a way, it's a way that we try to outrun death. That because if we know we're going to die, what's the point? Somehow, you know, so, or we know we're going to die, so we got to get all the stuff done before that happens, or we got to get all the stuff done to make our lives worthwhile. And in the process, we forget to live. So it's not that there's a doing that needs doing, it's a being, and it's a being present to life, to connection, to the magnificence of the moment, which so few of us really allow ourselves to savor because we're so busy. We're so busy. And that busyness makes us not have to think about what the meaning of life is, or the fact that we're not going to be here forever, or any number of other things that the doing allows us to distract ourselves with. And I do say, I was going to say, I'm not saying don't do anything, but the fact is, I do say don't do anything until there's this inspiration. Now, I know that we don't all have the luxury, like we do need to, some of us need to care for other people, and there are certain obligations and responsibilities that we have, no doubt. And the more we can presence ourselves to this being state, the more peacefully we can move through all those other things. They're not necessarily mutually exclusive. I mean, there is a point where we can get so wrapped with the wonder and awe that we don't attend to the mundane requirements of things. That's possible. And so what we get to do is navigate that balance, because we're not in balance. We're pretty much out of balance, where we're just doing all the things and not being. And just imagine, what would it be like to be in a space where you can just truly 100% be where you are when you're there. What a concept, right? Because for most of us, we're here and we're thinking about, well, we should be there, or we're doing this, but we're thinking about, oh, but I have to do that, instead of allowing ourselves to be immersed in whatever this is in this moment. And the thing is that when we are able to allow ourselves that immersion, when we are able to be in the moment, to truly be in the moment, whatever it is we're doing gets done with much more grace, much more ease, much more presence, appreciation, maybe even joy, even if it's washing dishes. You know, things, it's so interesting to, when you're in the flow of life, it's almost like things do you, like you just sort of flow and all these things get done without you having to be the doing. It's pretty remarkable. So Rosalind says, clearing rocks from the path versus walking around them. Are we problem solving mindset? Or maybe we can look at what is the relationship. Maybe the rocks aren't obstacles that need to be moved after all. I love that, Rosalind. Maybe, oh, this is a good one. This is really good, because you're talking about obstacles. And one of the entryways into this different state of being, I think, is to recognize or to identify something that presents as an obstacle as an opportunity. And it doesn't mean that that thing that's an obstacle doesn't present a lot of emotional, doesn't trigger a lot of emotional reaction. It certainly can. Sometimes things are just shitty. But, and this is in the same conversation yesterday, we're talking about, yeah, sometimes things are just shitty and we get to turn it into compost. I love that. Like, that's taking an obstacle and turning it into opportunity. And it doesn't mean that when it's shitty, it doesn't stink. Of course it does, but then it gets transformed. And so maybe the rocks aren't obstacles that need to be moved. Maybe the rocks get to be appreciated. Wow, look at that rock. How amazing is that rock? And as you move around it or over it or whatever, you get to appreciate it. So, you know, this person had a circumstance in their lives where that was creating upheaval, and it was a result of one person's going through a really difficult time, and it stirred other circumstances. And in looking at it, we looked at the profound opportunity that was available in this circumstance to make a huge difference in the life of a beloved child. And so much so that at the end of the conversation, the person I was speaking with said, you know, I'm almost glad this is happening, because they recognized what a gift was there, like what an opportunity to be potentially making a life-changing difference for this very, very special kid. So if we navigate from the vantage point that life is happening for me. Life is happening for me and through me rather than to me. That allows us to turn the shit to compost. It allows us to find the opportunity in what looked like an obstacle. Rubin says, take time and make time for the me time. Do what you do with a grateful heart along your journey and life's lesson to do better next time. I love it. Take time and make time for me time. And I think it's important to not do the spiritual bypassing thing. It's important to be with what's there. Like this shitty circumstance that we were talking about, there was a lot of emotion that got to get processed around that. You know, it's not like just painting a shitty situation with a pretty brush, because then you just have pretty colored shit, right? What it is, there's a transformation that occurs to transform that shit to compost, right? So there's a process of recognizing our emotional response and being present to all of that, and as that's processing through, to be looking for what is available. Yes, this is how I'm feeling. Not denial, not bypassing. We get to go through the whole process. And there is a point where it's tough, you know, the shit smells. We got to deal with that. And that's part of the transformation process too. So we're not looking to deny things, but we are looking to relate to things from a generative place. And that's not our traditional doing. What it is a shift of being. And that shift of being precipitates different action than if we're just doing the doing without really being present. So Rosalind says, I'm noticing the impermanence of things. That's a magnificent thing to notice. It can be really threatening to a lot of people, but the one constant that we can count on is change. And that's why when we recognize our own expression of life, that it too is ever changing, that who we are is not a fixed commodity. There may be a constant thread, but we are not a fixed commodity. That's why I come up with who we are as life, because life is not an endpoint. Life is a process, right? It is the process of the transformation of that shit to compost kind of thing. It is the transformation through different cycles, through different and ever-changing vessels. And so it's not to solve the problems of the world. Fundamentally, it's not a doing, it's a shift of being that then precipitates different doing. If I'm approaching something with joy and happiness, and I'm not saying that everything calls for joy and happiness, but if I'm approaching something with joy and happiness, I'm going to be approaching it differently than if I were approaching it with anger and shame. I'm just going to act differently. I'm going to do different things. And so we've been talking about propagating peace. We create that peace within ourselves and radiate that. And when we have that peace within ourselves, our interactions with others are going to be very different than if we are approaching others with anger. If we're approaching life with anger, it's a very different space. So on that note, just allow yourselves to settle into that space of being without all the doing, noticing the movement, noticing the impermanence, and allowing yourself the fullness of the breath, the relaxation of the shoulders, and the deepening connection. So with that, thank you, Dido. Dido just posted a link to other shows that you can watch. And with that, I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live here each weekday morning on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel at 9 a.m. Eastern. And I invite you to check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Network and Enlightened World Living. And I feel deeply graced and blessed to have the opportunity to have these conversations together. And so until next